I guess a good title for this would be a new era of tech repair in Charlotte. So recently, City Startup Labs celebrated the grand opening of ReConnex. It's a new venture focused on bridging the digital divide through community-powered tech repair. Now, you may be asking, where is this store? So you can find it. It's located in North Point Plaza. That's 5430 North Tryon Street here in Charlotte, left of Family Dollar. And this is just a really, really cool initiative that's happening. I want to bring in two gentlemen. One I've already met months ago. We were sort of reminiscing about our last story. That's Henry Rock. He is the up top, if you're looking on the screen, up top, that's Henry Rock, founder and executive director of City Startup Labs, also the co-owner of ReConnex. Below him, that is Ellsworth Usher Jr., co-owner of ReConnex and graduate of REAP, which is a part of City Startup Labs. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate your time. I can't believe it's been 6 months, Henry, since our story. I met you. Where did we meet again? Was it Central Piedmont?
Well, when we first
when we first met.
Yeah. That's where our
on a cold day.
Yeah, it was. Right.
Much different day today.
Indeed, like 180 degrees.
Yeah, right.
Hopefully not 180 degrees outside, but yeah.
Let's talk, before we get to ReConnex, can I start with you? So,
sure.
City Startup Labs. So we did the story. And the great thing about this platform is, so you probably saw the story. You can check it out now on our website. And we only really got to get a little bit into your story, with 10-second sound bites, 15-second sound bites. Can you give us a little bit of background of where you come from, and also how did you start City Startup Labs?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll try to shrink this down in a fairly digestible time frame. But I come from the New Jersey, New York area, moved down here from Harlem, New York, and had this idea of City Startup Labs in the mid-aughts, around 2008 or so. I had this notion of how do we get young black men in particular. Actually, at that time, it was really former gang members and formerly incarcerated folks into the game of entrepreneurship, and wanted to do a entrepreneurs boot camp. I'm probably going back a little further because at the time, Cory Booker was becoming mayor of Newark, New Jersey. So I presented this to his incoming administration, said, hey, listen, I think this would be a great idea for Newark, and especially, given the issues that they were having with gangs and such. And I said, what about this idea? They thought it was a great idea, but they had a lot on their plate, so they couldn't entertain it. So fast forward a few years, Michael Bloomberg, who was then mayor of New York, had something called the Young Men's Initiative that he was doing with George Soros. So I dusted off this idea and said, hey, listen, why don't we turn this into an academy? Knew the co-chair of this initiative that the two had, called the Young Men's Initiative, which was focused on young men of color around the areas of education, criminal justice, and employment. And the co-chair introduced me to the folks that were spearheading this, and I said, hey, here it is, great idea, what do you think? They said, great idea. However, it's outside of our bailiwick, so another ding, and so I kept plodding away. National Urban League, speaking with them about how could we pilot this thing in Charlotte, knowing that I was moving down to Charlotte, and ultimately sort of expand this to other affiliates that they had around the country. And what we were able to do, in fact, was to land this with the local Urban League chapter. And Patrick Graham was the CEO at the time, and he saw the value and the efficacy of the idea. And so we piloted this with the National Urban League, or I'm sorry, the local Urban League. And we were, solely focused on working with young black men at the time. And a couple of years later, we moved to UNCC's campus, and with that, we ultimately ended up expanding to actually went co-ed, right? Women were having their faces pressed up against the glass, saying, "You guys are having too much fun in there. What about us?" So we went co-ed, and of course, the women came in with as gangbusters, and we really had a lot of success with them. However, it was also in and around all of this was this this sort of bomb that was dropped on the city by Raj Chetty, and his Chetty's study had identified Charlotte as being 50th, as we all know, 50th amongst the top 50 markets in terms of socioeconomic mobility. Of course, as often is done, a task force was created to understand what was going on, and then out of that came Leading on Opportunity. They issued a report and a series of recommendations, and we noted that returning citizens, or those who are justice impacted, formerly incarcerated folks, as well as entrepreneurship, was really kind of given short shrift. And so I felt that it was important for us to really kind of lean in to these particular aspects, or I should say misses, in my estimation, in that report. And also around the same time, when I started here in Charlotte, there were maybe just a handful of what we call entrepreneurial support organizations, and only one really that was focused on dealing with the population that we were. And then a few years later, as we used to say back in the day, lottie-dottie and everybody came out with a entrepreneurship program, right? So you couldn't walk out of the door without stumbling over entrepreneur, this, that, and the other. So we had to really, kind of rethink what our value proposition was going to be, and where we felt that we could, essentially have the most impact. And so those things, taken together, were part of the reason why we decided to focus on this justice-impacted population. And really, in some cases, it was like kind of coming full circle, right? So we started our reentry entrepreneurship program 2018-19 as a pilot. We learned a lot from that. And then, of course, 2020, COVID hit. And we had to shift gears or pivot a bit to workplace development. And so we, at the time, with the help of the city and also the United Way, we designed, developed, and ultimately deployed a digital navigators program. Because part of my thinking at that time, and still to this day, is that we needed to really get our participants engaged in, I'll call it 21st century workforce development, right? They need to have the skills that are, that they can take, throughout their career, and not just the kinds of typical jobs that formerly incarcerated folks get, if they get any job for that matter, which is, labor intensive and that sort of thing, right? So we trained this new cohort of reapers, as we call them, because Reentry Entrepreneurship Program is called REAP as well. And we took them through a Google IT Pro support certification, and then trained them how to become digital navigators. And we worked with the city of Charlotte, with the library, and we were involved in the distribution of several thousand computers during COVID.
Wow.
During COVID, also happened to exacerbate the digital divide, right? It became really kind of front and center during that period. But also at the same time, we were working with the Access Charlotte program, so we sourced and placed several folks that were helping open broadband stand up public Wi-Fi all around Charlotte, and then it was also at that time, or shortly thereafter, that we ultimately decided to sort of hand the baton to the Center for Digital Equity. It was called Digital Charlotte then, as they were standing up a digital navigators program. So we got them sort of off and running with that, and they've since taken that over. And now we're here talking about ReConnex, which is another one of several initiatives that we have going with City Startup Labs.
I think you teased it during our last story about 6 months ago about ReConnex and what you guys were hoping to do there. It is open. I just pointed that, again, if you're just listening, the location, North Point Plaza, North Tryon Street in Charlotte. Just left a Family Dollar if you're in that shopping center. How did you guys land on the name, the partnership?
Right.
How did that come about?
Right. So in and around this time that I was talking about, where we were, sort of shifting to more of a tech-oriented or tech-centric kind of training and skills development, I was. I had this notion of, well, how could we help folks that are returning home and give them both a device and access, right? Because typically what happens is that when folks come back home, one of the first things they need is to, start communicating. And, as we know today, it's cell phones. So we were thinking really in terms of providing that sort of point of entry resource, and also help to take alleviate a pain point that many friends and family have, because they're, when you come home, you're going to be on their plan, and they're paying for the device, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were thinking along those lines, and then sort of secondarily thinking about device repair and digital fluency training, right? Getting folks, of course, coming home, many cases coming home after decades in prison, getting them conversant in digital literacy, right? So that was the original idea, and the word ReConnex is actually a contraction of two words, reentry connections, right? And so rather than, we made some inroads in sort of that first phase that I was mentioning to you, but decided really to kind of hone in on the device repair piece, because we felt, again, having been involved with distribution of computers and the like, and the Center for Digital Equity as well as E2D, they were, distributing tens of thousands of computers during the COVID stretch. And so we knew that at some point or another, not only with those devices, but, just everyday wear and tear on your phone, that is a thing. And we also were thinking about, how could we position ourselves so that we're not part of this e-waste stream, but rather a resource for that, or to mitigate that. And so that was, also part of the thinking here. And we shifted gears as entrepreneurs do. We're, as City Startup Labs, entrepreneurial as an organization, and we're always iterating and innovating and all that. So we just shifted gears and said, hey, listen, let's move towards the device repair piece, and that's what we're focused on now, right at the moment.
Ellsworth, I want to bring you in. I promise I'm not forgetting about you, Ellsworth. So correct me if I'm wrong. Folks who are Justice Impact, they work in the store, run the store. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, work in, co-own. We are a collective. We work together. They're a part of the process. They're allowed to basically pass judgment across the board, right? We all decide together what's kind of happening from a day to day. Yes, obviously we lean on Henry and CSL for a lot of top level things. I typically go through some different operational pieces throughout the day. We have another individual that manages the store, one that assists her, and we also have a lead tech that's involved.
And we were talking about this earlier in the lobby. You know, nobody should have to choose between their groceries and making sure their phone, their tablet, or their device is fixed.
Yeah.
It's essential at this point. Having this is important. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's your lifeline to the world, right? It's a super important thing. When you know, Henry presented this to me as like, hey, you know, I'd love your help to kind of stand this thing up. You know, I was absolutely for it, as you know, I view him as a mentor and all of, you know, I'm sure you've had your experience with him already. You know, like, okay, cool, you know, I want to watch this guy. And that just gave me a solid front row to be able to pick his brain and go through the process. But as they presented this to me and we did the research, as we've learned through that REAP program to understand what's going on with the other businesses and the industry that we want to deal with, I realized that the cost point for somebody to fix their phone is north of, you know, $150 to $180 for just a simple screen repair in most cases.
Wow.
And that's pretty much average across the board. So if somebody has to make the decision between fixing their phone so it can work, so they can go to work, or they can drop their kids off, or whatever it is that might be, versus we know grocery prices are what it is now, that makes a very hard decision for most people. So I was then tasked with trying to figure out how can we get that price reduced, still operate as a business, because I think a lot of times people confuse, especially us, what we're doing at ReConnex as like some sort of nonprofit. We are for profit. We want to make sure that we're in the community and serve the community well, but we obviously have to make money so that we stay open, that we pay our people equitably, and that everybody is a part of the process, and we're able to provide high-level service. So I had to kind of be tasked with figuring out how to make sure that we can keep a price point that feels good for everyone, that allows us to stay in business.
Can you talk about how were you able to get connected with Henry? I know you talked. You said he's a mentor, but and we talked about it a little bit in the lobby. It's sort of your background, but can you talk about your background, where you're from?
Absolutely. You know, I was born in New York. You know, Brooklyn Hospital. I ended up moving to California when I was, I don't know, 12 or something like that. Was there for quite a while. You know. My family, I'm first generation American. My family, the whole family's from Belize. So we ended up moving to Charlotte because, as we all know, you know, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, all that. My dad was a pretty big project manager, worked at Merrill Lynch and Countrywide. They ended up recruiting him. We came here. I was a bit shocked moving to the South obviously from those larger cities. I'm thinking, you know, as the plane was landing, we were landing in a cornfield. But, you know, it turned out we had some skyline. I was like, okay, there's something here. But yeah, I was here and actually went to college in Elizabeth City, then ended up going also to Atlanta and was in the circuit of Atlanta, New York, and Charlotte for quite some time. Ended up finding out about City Startup Labs as I was actually coming back to Charlotte from living in Brooklyn again for a short bit, and I ended up finding a program. I wanted to connect with like-minded individuals. That's what I was after. Was I want to be around people that speak like me, look like me, but also think like me. And there was a lot of separation there, I think, that happens when you talk about the community and black folks and justice impacted folks that's also trying to do creative and big things. So I ended up finding City Startup Labs. Loved the process, loved the team, and was just enamored with how can I help? How can I be involved? And as we went through that, I gave pretty much everything I could to all my folks around me because I wanted everybody to win. And I think out of that, Henry saw that and said, hey, I think you'll be an asset here. So that's how I ended up being involved in ReConnex.
And also there's a connection too, because you are friends with one of our first alum.
I am.
Victor. And Victor spoke highly of you as well. So so there's this CSL family has grown over the years. We've been at it since 2014. So we've got a number of folks that have come under the bridge.
Henry, you know everybody, because I feel like I've been at a couple events since our last. I'm like, but you've been in the distance, and I kind of had to, get in and out. But I'm like, Henry knows everybody.
Not quite. But yeah. I think it's important, really, with the work that I do, to make sure that the folk that work with us have agency, and I'm not about micromanaging, although there are times when I want to, and that certainly can I guess ruffle some feathers. But I think hey, listen, I'm of a certain age, and I've seen some things, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think it's really important to provide autonomy and give folks the opportunity to, just kind of run with the opportunity that we've given them, And so that's really kind of what's happening with ReConnex. What's also important about this, so we've said this word co-ownership a bit, right?
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I think is really important about this particular business as a social venture is that it is not only co-owned and operated by folks, but it's a workers' co-op, right? And workers' co-op it's not a new concept here in the country, but it's it's beginning to gain more traction. And I felt that in this case it was particularly important because when we talk again about socioeconomic mobility and kind of overlay that with entrepreneurship, the typical entrepreneurial model doesn't really serve trying to address socioeconomic mobility head on, right? Because you have this hierarchy usually, right? You've got the owner or co-owners at the top of the pyramid, and then you got the worker bees, and they're lucky if they can get stock options or some equity in the company. And so what the worker co-op does is that it provides a much more sort of egalitarian the distribution of wealth, and also wealth and equity and governance, and that really comes out of a long tradition that was established. At least my introduction to it was established by Milana Karenga, who was the founder of the cultural nationalist movement in this country. And those of you who are familiar with Kwanzaa, there are two principles that sort of undergird our work, and one of those principles is what's called Ujamaa, or cooperative economics, and the other is Ujima, collective work and responsibility. So it was really important to kind of have this be foundational and kind of undergird this work, this social venture undertaking.
And when I hear co-op, I think, first time I heard it was when it comes to like grocery stores and communities, right? Giving community a slice of the pie.
Right.
And I have to mention this too. The store, ReConnex, is in the corridors of opportunity.
Yeah. So we were intentional about having this be, and subsequently the other locations that we have on tap, to center this in the city's corridors. These happen to be, they're pretty much in sync and in tandem with those areas that were called out in the Chetty study.
Yeah.
Right. And so the corridors themselves are, the sort of central business districts of these areas, and needless to say, when it comes to device repair, when it comes to devices and getting, cellular service and all that kind of stuff, there, there's a proliferation of those kinds of stores in these communities, right? I don't know how, whether or not there's some sort of exploitative thing going on there, but I do know that they proliferate, right? I mean, you'll even find a Boost next to a Mint next to, they're like right next to each other, right? So you wonder about that, but But conversely, there's no device repair business in these corridors, right? So there's a, when going back to the digital divide, you can be connected and, bridge that divide. But when your device breaks, then you're back on the other side of the gap, right?
Yeah.
And so we wanted to really kind of lean into this and do it in a way that was really thoughtful and, as we said, kind of community-centered.
Well, if you're listening to this right now, I will. I want you guys to check out this store. Again, this is ReConnex. It's on North Point Plaza. That's North Tryon Street, 5430 North Tryon Street here in Charlotte. Again, I mentioned left of Family Dollar, just to kind of give you a visual. Thank you guys for your time. This, again, Henry Rock, founder and executive director of City Startup Labs, also co-owner of ReConnex. Ellsworth Usher Jr., co-owner of ReConnex and a graduate of REAP. Guys, thank y'all for your time, man. It was a pleasure. We're going to have you back.
Indeed.
Indeed. I know I'll see Henry around somewhere because he's just around. Thank you guys again for your time. And you can catch this interview shortly. It'll be up on our YouTube page and also on our website.